Welcome to Your Average Climber.
Welcome to Your Average Climber, the podcast edition. No, but this is episode 4, and this is the first episode of Going Outside, and this was at the Rico Suave Arete, which I had never been to before, but I should also introduce that Cara is here too. She'll be help talking about stuff because she knows more about outdoor climbing than I do, and she also knows more about lead and trad climbing, which trad is just traditional climbing, and lead is
where you take the rope up with you. I feel like for a lot of climbers we get this question of like, how does the rope get up there when people see, like you outdoor climbing and you take it up with you. And in trad climbing, traditional climbing, how that happens is you place your own protection in natural features of the rock, like cracks or little crevices. You'll place things like, they're called cams or nuts, and they just fit in those cracks, and then when you apply any sort of force to them, they'll sort of lock themselves in the rock. So if you fall, you're caught on that, where sport lead climbing is a little bit safer because the protection is already in the rock, so there's already bolts periodically up the wall that you clip
and depending on where you go, most places some will actually have the anchors in the walls already. It's anchor, right?
Yeah.
Even the, not the end, but the ones going up, they're called anchors.
I call them bolts.
Bolts.
Some people might call them anchors. So anchors are typically at the top.
Yeah. So some areas will actually have the bolts already in place, so you just have to go up and clip into the area. Yeah. But this is actually Cara and Abby's friend Jamal. He is climbing the 5-7, and he's the one who's actually leading the route to put the rope at the top for me and Abby to climb. And is lead sort of just synonymous with trad?
No, lead happens with trad and sport.
Yeah. Sport is like the indoor trad.
Well, not really. You still do sport climbing outside. That's just when you have the bolts already placed on the wall. So like what he did with Rico Suave, the next climb that you'll see, that is sport climbing, but it's still lead because he is still leading the route.
Gotcha. I'm so glad you're here because even I'm learning things, because I just thought lead was synonymous with trad because, when you lead, the reason it's called like leading is because you're leading the first go up and taking the rope with you.
Right.
So you're basically leading everyone else into the climbing session.
Yes.
And so I just thought they were synonymous, but sport is just not having to place the bolt yourself.
Exactly.
It's just them already being there. And I guess that takes some of the challenge out, because in this, I actually edited out most of the breaks where Jamal is putting in the bolts or putting in the nuts, because he could be up there for 3 minutes trying to place a nut correctly so that it doesn't pop out.
Right, because you have to find the right size, the right placement in the crack. If you pull on it too and it's loose, you're like, okay, I have to find a new spot for it. But it's interesting. You just said something, I already forgot what it was, but that there was actually, so trad came first in climbing. Traditional climbing was first. But there was this whole kind of stigma against sport climbing when it originated, because people said it wasn't
climbing.
It wasn't climbing because you were altering the rock by putting the bolts in. And
well, even now there's so many things like that where they now call like knee bars or toe hooks or heel hooks is cheating to some people.
Oh, that's wild.
And even before chalk became a thing, when chalk first started in climbing, people thought that was cheating.
Yeah, and that it's a barrier between you and the rock.
Yeah, and so it's crazy that every time something new is introduced into climbing, immediately people are like, that's not actually climbing. You're not actually doing anything. But now, like, having the bolts already in the wall is pretty common.
Right, and actually, like, that increased the level of difficulty in a lot of climbing, because, like, now face climbing was a thing, and, grades went up, difficulty went up when sport climbing was around, so people were like, hey, like, maybe this is actually, like, something we should do.
Yeah, also probably when you think of climbing, you think of really tall walls, and you see all those clips, all the quick draws.
The bolts, yeah.
The bolts. And you see those hanging on the walls, and that's usually what people think of, or if they think of like competition climbing, they think of those really tall with all of the clips and all the bolts and people going up and clipping in. And it's extremely difficult. I mean, Jamal makes it look very easy.
He does, yeah.
But he was later, it didn't get on video. He was trad leading a 512, I think.
Leading trad 512?
I think so. I could be wrong.
Shooketh if Jamal was
It's the
leading
one, he only
512,
got halfway up on it. It's when you came. Cara came late
on
to
the
this
other
climbing.
side?
Yeah.
That's sport. But he stick clipped up his way. Up the wall. He didn't trad it. He didn't trad.
Are you sure?
Yep. Because I climbed it right after him. It's not trad.
Oh, well, sorry. Well, he's
You're
sport climbed.
learning.
I'm learning. You're learning and I'm learning. That's what this channel is
We're
about, for
learning.
me to grow as a climber, and I'm learning.
Exactly.
But with a lot of the edits, you'll see, it is him just finding the right placement, and for some of those, it took a lot longer, and I didn't want to have a 50-minute long episode as compared to, I got this down to, I think, right under 20 minutes, so editing out the little pauses, there's just him finding the correct ones. Also him taking rests. And later when I climb, there's going to be edit cuts because I required a lot of rests.
Very important climbing is resting. Knowing when to rest is a big thing. When I first started,
That's
I never
true.
took any rest.
And this is also my third time going outside. I don't do a lot of climbing outside, and it's very different than climbing indoors, because whereas being on a boulder, you're on it for maybe a minute and a half max.
Yeah.
Depending on how hard it is. But with route climbing, it's a 15-minute excursion.
Also, the holds aren't like, they're not all the same color and all taped off. So
Yeah, you don't know where you're going.
You have to learn to read
You have
the rock
to-
and read the route. Yeah.
You can see chalk areas, and you're like, okay, so that's around the area that I want to go. But even then, you have to feel around, and it could take you 45 seconds to a minute alone just to find a hold
Right.
to go to the next bit.
And even like Rico Suave Arete, it's one of the only places in the New River Gorge that you can climb when it's raining because it has this really great roof over it. So the chalk is never washed away. Other routes, the chalk will wash off, so you won't even have that. You just need to be able to see, where the feet, where the hole. It's like, how do I get up there?
Yeah, that's also the hard part, is finding the feet,
Yeah.
because they're not as clear cut as you think. But yeah, so this is just me gearing up to do the same thing that Jamal just did, only on my way up, I will be clearing the bolts so that it becomes top rope only.
Yes. So you take out the protection on your way.
So I'll be taking out the protection, which, if you didn't know, the ones, they kind of look like little squares, little nuts.
A nut, yeah.
A nut. It looks like a little square. Jamal told me that doesn't cost much.
No, they're actually pretty cheap.
Nuts are pretty cheap.
Cams, though.
But the cam, which is probably what you see like in movies of rock climbing,
Yeah.
where it's
Like the spring-loaded
it's a
thing.
spring. They squeeze and it
Yeah.
closes in, and then you let go and it opens.
Yeah.
Those were very expensive.
Oh, yeah.
And he told me multiple times, he's like, when you take this out, you will squeeze and pull out. Do not push it back in. Do not do this. And do not drop it. So not only is it climbing very difficult, and then you have to stop, unclip a draw, clip it on yourself, and then if there's a cam in, you have to unclip it, and then you're holding yourself on with one hand and unclipping a $200 device.
Someone else's $200.
Someone else's $200 device that if you drop it, you will have to give them a new device.
Yeah.
It's extremely scary. I think
Yeah.
that's more exhilarating than climbing.
Oh my gosh.
Is the cost of it.
And the worst part is, like, if you place a cam or even a nut wrong, you might not get it back.
Yeah.
Like, it can just get stuck in the wall permanently, and then you just get to leave without that.
Well, I feel like with a nut, that wouldn't be that big a
No,
loss.
but
Because he
like
said
a
those are like
cam,
maybe $10.
Which I have seen actually at Rico Suave Arete. It was like months before me, Jamal, and Abby were there, and this couple comes around the corner and they said, "Hey, there's a cam stuck in the wall over there. We can't get it out. You're welcome to it if you can get it." We spent like 15 minutes trying to dig that thing out of the wall, and it is just a permanent fixture of the rock at this
Oh
point.
my gosh. There's actually in this, it's a little bit higher up, but it's the first nut I came to that I had to remove. It was pretty locked in there, so I had to take, it looked like the end of like an ice pick.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had to take that and essentially punch it over and over with this
Yes.
sharp object to knock it back into the rock so I could then squeeze it out of the rock.
Yeah.
And they were like, be careful when you're pulling, because if you let go, you're just going to punch yourself in the face.
That's great.
Great. That's what I want, is to punch myself in the face as I'm climbing.
Right. But then you think about how secure that nut probably was. So if you fell, you're good to go.
Yeah. Well,
you're not going anywhere.
He's very good at securing the nuts.
Yeah. I know some people who they swear by trad climb. Honestly, I'm still too afraid to do it because I think I watched too many videos on YouTube of people's gear like blowing when they fall. And so, I'm just like, I don't really want that to happen. But I know people who they swear by, they say like they feel more secure on a well-placed cam or a well-placed nut than a bolt when sport climbing.
That's insane to me because I don't know if I will ever trad climb. I might try sport climbing indoors.
Yeah.
Just because then I could see and read the route, but I don't believe I would ever lead trad. I just
First of all, can't afford that, so.
That's true. And I think this is right here. This is where I get to the nut, yeah. So that big cut, that was about 3 minutes of me trying to get a nut out of the wall. But, I mean, I had a good experience going outside. For a 5.7, what is that in terms of, like, indoor grading? Because I think with like some of my last episodes, people might understand that like a V1 is pretty easy, and then like a V4 is kind of difficult, but a 5.7, that's like an entirely different way of grading.
Yeah.
How would a 5.7 relate to?
I would equate like 5.6, 5.7 to maybe like a 0.
Well, that makes me feel better about myself because I have such a hard time on 5.7s. Great. But I mean...
But it's a sustained 0, though. Because, like, in the gym, like you said, you're up there for, like, on a 0, what? 30 seconds?
30 seconds.
Yeah, on the wall, you're up there for, like, a solid 10 to 15 minutes. So, like, you have to remember, like, stamina comes into play. And you... Like, again, the route isn't as clear as it might be inside. So you have to pause a little bit longer. You have to remember to take... watch your breath, take breaks, and all this. It's just so different. Like
finger pump, constantly having to reapply chalk.
Yes, so it's hard to really compare. But I would say like level of climbing intensity would equate to like a 0. Like if I walked up to a 7 and someone was like lead that, I would say okay without question. On sport, not track.
No. Let's clarify. Not track.
Very clear. Because at that point I know, like, okay, the holds are going to be very clear to find. Like, there's going to be lots of feet, lots of jugs. Like,
I don't think there were lots of jugs on this.
Well, this is different because it's trad climbing, so you're dealing with a crack, or like face climbing or sport, like typical sport climbing.
You're referring to sport, yeah. They usually have jugs in there to do rest moments.
Right. So crack is like pretty different because, well, not in 5.7. You're not really doing hand or foot jams or anything like that, but you still have to like know how to lay back. It's very much about body position.
Because with crack climbing, it basically is putting your hands in the crack and then taking your feet and pushing away from the wall to have that tension, and then you just inch your hand up. Yeah. Your hands up over and over until you get to a different portion.
Which is also something you never really get to practice in the gym.
No, it's not something you do in the gym because there's not really a hold to simulate a crack.
No.
Here, Abby got a really cool shot of me through the belay glasses, which makes belaying a lot easier. But it's around this area that there's this very wide bit, which is really good to get your body into. But I don't have the stamina to do outdoor climbing, so it was at this part that I was just completely tired.
No.
Right, so that rock up on your left, you
up towards the
have to
left.
once you get up there, kind of like shift your whole body around it so that you're behind it at that point. It is super awkward. The one time I climbed that was my one. I was like, that was weird.
But I got up to... There were only 2 more bolts on the wall and then the final anchor at the top, and I couldn't get the last 2 bolts. I just had to come down. I was extremely pumped and
saving it up
for the 5.9 later. No, I'm not at all used to outdoor climbing. It's an entirely different experience than indoor. I mean, you can get pumped indoor climbing. You just get pumped over 2 hours, whereas getting pumped over 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But it was really good. I woke up with tennis elbow.
Oh my gosh.
I had an icy hot patch actually on too, and so that made it even better. So the Rico Suave Arete was the one we did later. Oh, it's a 510.
510A.
510A.
Yes, ma'am.
And A, B's, and C's are just like, it's a little bit it's just kind of like a plus system. But I mean, even then you have like 10A plus or 10B plus, and so it's just kind of like if it's a 10C, it's harder than a 10A.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's basically the only way to get around it. Mm-hmm. But this was much later in the climb, and did someone lead this one?
Jamal led this one.
Jamal led this one too?
Yep. Because I had just gotten there. Am I belaying? I think I'm
you
belaying
were,
on
yeah,
this, yeah.
You came in a little late, but you were belaying me at this point.
Yes.
And I believe this was after you tried the Sport 512.
I tried that at the very end of the day.
Yeah. No, the one on this rock side or on the other side?
There's an 11 right here, and then on the other face.
So you did the 511. You did the 11 because someone had to clean
I cleaned it.
You had to clean the 11.
Gosh, I black out every time I climb.
It's so hard to remember. Climbing is something that you do it, and then when you're done, you're like, what happened?
Right. Someone says, okay, so how'd you get through that move? And you're like, I honestly have no idea.
Yeah, so we're watching this, and this happened...
Oh, man.
Oh, I don't even remember the date. If I remember the date, I'll put it in the description so you know. But I can't remember the date that we went, but it's been a couple weeks, and so now we're doing the voiceover work for it, and it's hard to remember exactly what you did.
Yeah.
And so what happened that day.
I've led this one twice. This was actually my first 10 lead. So I can tell you a little bit about it because the fear made it stick out in my mind.
But it's a sport lead.
It's a sport lead, yes. God, again, cannot trad. Cannot do it. But so this route, I think it's like pretty sustained the entire way through. But what's fun about it is it kind of changes as you go, so it's a bunch of different kinds of climbing. So the beginning that you just walked through,
I felt that too, that there were parts where there are crimps, but there are also parts where there are really nice jugs, and then there gets to an overhang bit.
Yes. Yeah, so the first part of it, it's all pretty big moves, but there's like lots of jugs, a lot of feet, but it's still like you have to commit to that big reach, which obviously you flew through that.
Yeah, that was the part where you had to get an extremely high foot and then push up on that.
Yes, and there's like 2 or 3 moves just exactly like that all in a row right at the beginning. And then you get to this part, I think you're there, you have to move further right onto the wall, and it's on this it's like a terrible flake. It's like hardly a flake. It's just like a feature on the wall that looks like a flake, but it's actually a sloper. The whole way up, there's one good spot way up at the top, but you really have to think about shifting your weight from left to right to get on, to be able to pull off of that flake as best you can.
Also, I'm going to apologize now for any background noise. We are next to a highway, so there's going to maybe be some background noise, but hopefully it won't come through as bad. But yeah, I think that's the part that I made it past. And I also I rested a lot on this. Mm-hmm. But even on this one, I didn't actually get to go through either of them completely. I got to like the very end, like the final like 5 or so feet, and then I was completely tired.
Yeah. This one also, it's intimidating once you get to the top because you go, it's on an arete, so you're a little exposed at this point. You get up onto this ledge, way up left, and there's this little roof. And you have to reach up pretty much as high as you can, and there's this nice lip at the top that you can kind of scoot around.
Yeah, that's where I made it to, and you can kind of see it. It's like right above me right now. It's just like that little lip. Mm-hmm. That's where I made it to, and that's the part that I was just kind of too pumped to make it that reach to the other edge.
Yeah.
But then you get to that edge, and then you have to like traverse right, and then continue going up.
Yes, and then at that point, you go from like these slopers to this like crazy sort of overhang, and then you get to this next part, and it's pretty much all like crimps.
Which you did this right after me.
Yeah.
And you cleaned the route.
Yes.
And brought everything back down.
I did.
But overall, I mean, super fun. Rico Suave was super fun. The hike to it sucked. The hike out of it sucked worse.
Also, yes.
But I have really enjoyed myself. I'm real glad we went. We wouldn't have been able to do it without Jamal, so thanks to Jamal for leading trad on all of these. But yeah, so we'll just finish it out with me doing as much of this 510A that I could But I want to thank everyone for coming again. I learned some new stuff today, thanks to Cara, and hopefully you guys learned some new stuff and enjoyed what you saw. But we'll see you again for the next time. And if you liked what you saw, maybe you can comment below if you'd like to see anything else, or if you have any questions about climbing that you would like to ask me or Cara.
Or any corrections.
Love
that.
tell me my form is bad. Just comment below. But yeah, see you next time.